On the podcast today, we are going to dissect chapter 33 of the Tao Te Ching, which makes up the 33rd episode of the 81 meditations on the Tao Te Ching. And as usual, Guiyang will read Jia Fu Feng and Jane English's translation, and I will read Derek Lin's translation.
Knowing others is wisdom. Knowing the self is enlightenment. Mastering others requires force. Mastering the self needs strength. Those who know they have enough are rich. Perseverance is a sign of willpower. Those who stay where they are endure. To die but not to perish is to be eternally present.
Those who understand others are intelligent. Those who understand themselves are enlightened. Those who overcome others have strength. Those who overcome themselves are powerful. Those who know contentment are wealthy. Those who proceed vigorously have willpower. Those who do not lose their base endure. Those who die but do not perish have longevity. And in this chapter, you're starting to see a focus on immortality, the idea of the death of the ego, and is there something eternally present after the death of the ego? So Lao Tzu is really honing in on this idea within this chapter. And so, again, this brings into ideas of reincarnation within Taoism, which a lot of Taoists don't want to acknowledge, but Lao Tzu is hinting at a form of reincarnation here of something that may live on, but something that is eternally present and is beyond the concept of the theological aspect of the soul, so to speak.
It's somewhat like Lao Tzu's version of immortality, isn't it? Not as in just the martial arts aspect of immortality, but immortality as in to die, but not to perish is to be eternally present. So to die, death of the ego, the idea of me, I, this individual sense of I is to die, but not to perish is to be eternally present. So that is to say that there is something beyond the ego, something beyond the idea of me, right? So that's where the real Taoist idea of immortality is.
Yes, that's right. And like I said, that's where there's a difference between the Western religious ideas of the soul as opposed to these Eastern ideas of immortality, enlightenment, etc., where there's something eternal in the here and now. It's not something that you get after death. Your soul doesn't go to a type of heaven after death for the good deeds you've done in this previous life. The idea in Taoism is that Wu Qi, Tao and stillness, the ever-present ultimate reality of Tao, which is identical with Nirguna Brahman in Advaita Vedanta, which means Brahman without qualities, so without the manifest world and anything you can think of. And so that Wu Qi, that ultimate reality of Tao, is ever present and always here. And hence, Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi have an emphasis on the stillness of mind in the Tao Te Ching and the Zhuangzi text. And ironically, same within Advaita Vedanta. You know, we're filming this podcast from Tiruvannamalai with Arunachala in the background, and Sri Ramana Maharishi always emphasized on the silence of the Atman, the pure self, pure non-dual self. And that's something we abide in once we cease fragmenting our mind into 1,000 pieces, and then we run off here and there, and then we're caught in the 10,000 things, right? Yes. When the ever-present eternal reality, as Lao Tzu was talking about, is Wu Qi. It's always here. It's ever-present. The Tao is here.
Yeah, I love the concept of Wu Qi in Taoism, because that is again identical with Nirguna Brahman, and it's really, really fascinating because when we look at the eternal, infinite, the spiral, right? At the beginning of the spiral and right at the bottom, right at the end of the spiral, looks exactly the same. So microcosm, macrocosm, and macrocosm, microcosm, the kind of thing. So it's really interesting that we think that we are in this manifested world. Everything looks different, and it has different shapes and into 10,000 things, different colors and whatnot. So we like to dissect everything and we judge accordingly and whatnot. But in the end, even in this very reality, there is that Wu Qi, that like still point of the Tao, which is again identical with the Nirguna Brahman.
That's right. And that's always here. It's always here. But we come into harmony with the 10,000 things. the personality, the jiva in Sanskrit, if you will. And we believe that's who we truly are. And so then, as we have mentioned in previous chapters, we forget the Tao, as Lao Tzu always harps on about. It's when you forget the Tao that you can be a person and you can cause harm to others and cause harm to yourself. You can cause conflict. You can divide the world and fracture the world into a million pieces. And it's about coming back into harmony with that Wu-Chi and understanding that essentially, the Taoist mentality is oneness, is the nature of reality is one. It's not fragmented, but we divide it into two and then off we go down the rabbit hole. And that's due to our conditioning, our socialization process that we believe we are. And this chapter is saying once you get rid of that socialization process and that conditioning that you've gone through, then you come into harmony with this greater ultimate Tao. And Derek Lin, in his translation, has an interesting perspective, because even if you look at it from just a generic perspective of immortality, where if you've lived a really good life, then you will live on in the memory of other people. So essentially, the good deeds that you've done in your life, the great life that you've lived, is fragmented into 1,000 pieces in the minds of others. So you've essentially become infinite. Now, the argument there would be, well, most people are forgotten over time. Some, right? Like, we still talk about Lao Tzu and Shankara, Gautama the Buddha, but most of us will be forgotten. And there's actually a great piece in that too. But that's also, like, even if you look at it, just as I said, from a generic perspective, we all live on in the minds of others and the memories of others for a certain amount of time, particularly if we lived an honest and noble life and we weren't a prick, so to speak.
Yeah, it's actually the beautiful thing. I think that I know that not everyone can be remembered by everyone forever, really. But again, we are here in India, so we've met so many people over the years, the local Indians and also wonderful people come from other countries who spend a lot of time in India, and also some of them have passed away, right? That we even privately talk about those beautiful human beings that had moved on and how wonderful they were, and we often laugh about those with the jokes that those people sometimes made with us, and so it's a wonderful thing actually that we remember those beautiful souls.
Yeah, well, the cycle of life is pretty prevalent in India because of the amount of people, and you see the natural turnover of people dying and people are born. And as you were mentioning, particularly with our sadhu friends on Paradoxical Road here, we've met so many great sadhu friends over the years, and it can be a tough life. So not many live to very old age, let's say. And so we've seen, we didn't see them die, but every time we come back, there's one that's just not here.
We made a good friend with some sadhu friend, but then a couple of years later we come back around and they're not there anymore.
No. They've merged with the source.
Yes.
And here they've merged with Arunachala. So again, this chapter is about the dissolution of the self, and that's something a lot of people don't think about in Taoism, right? Like there's a Western perspective of Taoism where Taoism is just about going with the flow, dude, going with the groove of life and this and that. And that's an aspect of it. And you can only really go with the flow of life when there is no person there. When you're in your own way, that's like a dam in the river. So the river's power can't become your power. And you have to essentially get out of your way. So Lao Tzu is always emphasizing on the dissolution of the self. Now, why this particular part of Taoism amongst Westerners is constantly ignored, I don't really know, but it's something that we've talked about on the podcast at length, that the dissolution of the self, because first of all, reality is one, it's not two. So the concept of duality is a good fiction, but it's a fiction nevertheless. And so that's something that we all need to think about.
Yes. Again, as you mentioned earlier about the Christian idea of death there, like in Christianity, the doctrine itself is telling us we are sinners, we are guilty, we need to be forgiven in order to go to the heaven and this and that. So the underlying premises is that we are naturally bad, right? We're not, we're guilty, we're sinners, right? So we need to do good deeds to go to the heaven to please Jesus. so to say. But that is actually completely different and opposite perspective than how Taoism is. In Taoism, Lao Tzu always emphasized that us as a human beings are naturally good. We are naturally good, so that we don't need to think as if we are sinners. And that is to say that knowing the self, that's why in Korea we say people who follow the Taoism saying, he's a wipe in the Tao sort of thing. So that means, again, just to keep cleaning our hearts, which got conditioned by our socialization. So they keep wiping their heart to come to its purest form, which is the nature of ourselves. Then the heart itself will fully shines on its own. That's when the Tao truly make use of you.
That's right. And that purifying process of the mind is essential in spiritual practice. And I think a lot of non-dualist, and air quotes, miss this point because they think that I'm that already. I'm already Tao. I'm already Brahman. Why should I care about this and that? And then you see them worshipping Facebook. They'll sit on Facebook for hours on end. Or they're doing the non-dual police thing where they're jumping from spiritual video to spiritual video, waxing lyrical and why even worry about this and that? It's all the self and so forth and so on. And so they miss the point. So it's essential to have the purifying process of the mind. And as you mentioned in Korea with, wiping the Tao, is you're basically cleaning out the samskaras within your mind and your subconscious, all of the mental impressions, the subliminal imprints that we all accumulate from life. And then we ultimately can then see the nature of reality as it truly is, because then there's nothing eclipsing, or the illusion of subject-object split has actually disappeared. And you've merged with the greater totality. Not you as a person, but your fundamental, you've come back into harmony with your fundamental consciousness, your non-dual pure consciousness, because your ego's out of the way then, right? And so it's essential, particularly in Taoism, to purify the mind. It's essential to get out of social habits, to get out of cultural habits that inhibit your spiritual practice. This is why Lao Tzu is constantly telling people, in some sense, to head for the mountains. In some sense, figuratively, then other sense, literally. Like, it's great to go away and do your own sadhana, your own spiritual practice, to purify your mind so that you can come back into harmony with the nature of reality that's at the core of all of us.
And again, when we get to that stage, that we will experience such relief, right? It feels like a lot of pressure has disappeared, because all that pressure is coming from us trying to control things. Again, jiva trying to take control over everything, right? But if you were to give up everything to a Tao or Brahman or Atman, then actually the jiva intrinsically illusion don't need to take any part anymore, right? Because the Brahman itself, Tao itself, can take over and it leaves you. Right?
Yes.
In that sense, that you don't need to try anymore.
No.
Effortless. Life becomes effortless, so that we feel such relief, such freedom, and feel so light, right?
That's right. And so for that process to happen, for that great relief to come, as Lao Tzu mentions in this chapter, it's not in knowing others that you acquire wisdom. It's actually in knowing yourself. And so in this chapter, Lao Tzu is kind of speaking about that, look, you can be intelligent and you can know others, you can understand the world, you can understand all sorts of nuance about the world. But in general, that's not what true knowing is. The greater knowing is knowing yourself, and that's actually what leads to this ultimate reality. And we've built a world where we're constantly trying to correct others, we're constantly trying to portray our beliefs onto other people, and then we forget the source of our knowing, which is ourselves. And so then you've got the birth then of a tyrant, where the tyrant runs around the world trying to impose their own beliefs on the people, and then that's the birth of all sorts of conflict and division in the world. Where Lao Tzu says in this one, knowing the self is enlightenment. So knowing that undifferentiated consciousness that we all are, that is the enlightenment. And then he also backs it up by saying mastering others requires force, mastering the self needs strength.
Yes.
So we unfortunately choose to align more with the former than the latter. So we'll want to force our opinions or,
Yes.
again, mastering others. We built a world where we try to master others. And then we find all sorts of reasons to justify our cause. And then what you see in the world then is you see a bunch of angry people.
Yes.
And as any sane person knows, anger is not good for the heart. And so if you're just an angry person, even though you feel as though your cause is justified, you're still an angry person nevertheless. And angry people cannot be trusted typically. It's only those who live with joy and that are happy that can be trusted.
Yeah, again, being angry is actually not only being unhealthy to that individual, but also it attracts the anger, right? That's why, again, you're trying to get rid of fire with fire. So that's just destined not to work, right?
You just continually throw fuel on the fire.
Yes.
And that's what some movements unfortunately do. It's just angry people attract angry people. Peaceful people attract peaceful people. We're here in Tiruvannamalai, and there's no angry person in town. Everyone's coming here for the right reason. No one cares about any sort of previous indiscretions by other people. It's just whatever, you're here for the right reasons.
Yes.
And the locals embrace you. They see you as a part of Brahman as well. And so a lot of these Western ideas that unfortunately Westerners think are universal aren't so.
Yes.
Because when you spend time in countries such as India, or you go to Africa or South America or places of this nature, a lot of Western ideas are thrown out the window. They don't even have any meaning at all in these places. And so then it becomes, well, is the world American-centric or is it just world-centric? So that's for people in America to come to their own conclusions about. But once you step outside of America, for example, I'm using America as an example here as a Western country, you'll see that a lot of those problems in America aren't anywhere else. And that's a fact of the matter. Even though you might say there's someone else to justify your own cause,
Yes.
but in general, you're just an angry person. And so the Tao Te Ching is about curing that illness of anger
Yes.
in people's hearts.
Yes, exactly.
And so instead of trying to know others and trying to force your opinion on others, just allow the world to be. Don't have any expectation for the world, just accept the world
Yes.
as it is.
Yes. And in this chapter, what it's emphasizing also is the strength and the willpower and enduring and these things. So as in strength as in to look within, right? The strength that's within, to look within, because that's not easy, right? Because forcing something to control or to happen is easier than enduring or persevering, right, with your own inner demons, so to say. So again, mastering the self needs strength. Yes, that resilience. It's trying to keep looking within, which needs a lot of actually time and courage.
That's right. And even in the line where Lao Tzu says, those who stay where they are endure, that's also alluding to those who abide in that uchi, they endure. So they have come to the ultimate realization of the essence of Tao, and as this last line says, to die but not to perish is to be eternally present. So it's only those who abide in that actually come to that ultimate realization. And so we lose that sense when we are fragmenting our mind into 1,000 pieces in society and through cultural conditioning.
Yeah, so when you mentioned the endure, kind of, that remind me the mudra posture of a Buddha, the bhumispasha, the immovable, the sitting posture, right? So whatever happens externally, once you sit with that mudra, you are not moving. You are in that immovable place where you find completely peaceful and strong within yourself, and you don't get influenced by any different ideas or whatnot, or you don't pay attention to what's happening externally. You are going to stay in that still point of the Tao, that bhumispasha.
That's right. And that's basically the essence of this chapter, isn't it? Staying in that still point.
Yes.
And those who know they have enough are the true wealthy.
Yes.
So the ones who know that, as you just mentioned, who abide in that, they are the ones with true wealth. Not someone driving a Lamborghini, putting their chin up like a peacock. That's insignificant, and that's also insecure.
Yes.
You need things to define your life. One who knows the Tao doesn't need anything because they're already abiding in that. And that's why they are the true rich.
Yes, yes.
And we all have that, but it's about remembering the Tao as opposed to forgetting it, as Tao Te constantly says. So, guys, we hope you enjoyed. Remember that immortality, reincarnation, things of this nature are an essential part of Taoism. And just before we leave, it just reminded me that there was a Buddhist teacher in the UK who had a satsang, right? And one of the students asked him, I love Buddhism, I love the teachings, but I don't believe in reincarnation or karma. Can I be a Buddhist and follow them without those? And he was pretty blunt. He said no, because these are part and parcel of the tradition. And what you are trying to do is superimpose a one life philosophy, which is actually a Christian philosophy, onto an Eastern philosophy. And so that's something for a lot of you to think about, because Taoism is of that nature as well. You can't just superimpose Christian ideals onto Taoism. Now, a lot of people say, well, I'm not Christian. But if you instantly have a one life theory as opposed to a many lives theory, that's already comes from a Christian indoctrination. Though you may say that you're atheist, it's still a Christian philosophy. And so you have to accept the Taoist principles and philosophy as they are. And immortality, even reincarnation, especially if you read the Wahoo Ching, are part and parcel of the Taoist tradition. So I just wanted to leave you guys with that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.